Hi, everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to dive into one of the biggest ideas in all of child development, attachment theory. You can think of it as the origin story for our relationships, how our very first bonds create a kind of blueprint that shapes every connection we make for the rest of our lives. So let's start with this simple image. A baby cries, a caregiver comes to help. It seems basic, right? The baby's hungry or tired or just needs a hug. But in that one moment of response, something so much bigger is happening. A connection is being built. And that simple, repeated dance is the absolute bedrock of attachment. It's where this whole story really begins. So here's our game plan. We're going to start with the power of that very first connection. Then we'll look at how that bond gets built during the wild ride of the first year. We'll explore the different patterns of attachment that can show up. After that, we'll see how this really does become a blueprint for life. And we'll wrap up by talking about what all this means for you, especially if you're planning to work with kids. All right, let's jump right in. First things first, what in the world is attachment anyway? Well, the guy who basically invented the theory, John Bowlby, called it a lasting psychological connectedness. But let's break that down. It's way more than just liking someone. It's a deep, powerful emotional bond. I like to think of it as this invisible emotional tether that connects a child to their caregiver, giving them a sense of safety and security even when they're not in the same room. Now, this whole theory really had two main architects. You have John Bowlby, who came up with the big idea that babies are literally hardwired to connect with adults for their own survival. It's pure evolution. But then his brilliant colleague, Mary Ainsworth, came along and asked the next big question. That's a great idea, but how can we actually see it? How do we measure it? And her answer was a fascinating experiment called the strange situation, which we'll get into in just a bit. So if this bond is so important, how does it actually get built? Well, let's zoom in on that critical first year of life, because that's when the foundation is laid. This whole thing doesn't happen overnight. It unfolds in stages. Right at the beginning, a newborn is basically an equal opportunity snuggler. They'll take comfort from just about anyone. But then, pretty quickly, they start to pick favorites. They figure out who their people are. And that leads to that phase that so many parents know so well, stranger anxiety and separation anxiety. Suddenly, they get really upset if a stranger comes too close or if their main person leaves the room. And you know what? As hard as that can be, it's actually a fantastic sign. It means a really strong, specific bond has formed. Eventually, that anxiety cools down as they learn, deep in their bones, that their caregiver is going to come back. So with all this happening, what's the caregiver's number one job? Well, it all boils down to two words: secure base. It just means being a consistent, predictable, and warm source of safety. It's about building this deep, gut-level trust. The baby learns, when I cry, someone comes. When I'm scared, I get comfort. I am safe in this world. Let's unpack that a little. A secure base does three key things. First, something called proximity maintenance, which is just a fancy way of saying the kid wants to stay close to their person. Second, it's a safe haven. When things get overwhelming or scary, that's who they run back to for comfort. And third, and this is the real magic of it, it's a secure base for exploration. A child who feels totally safe and connected is actually braver. They feel free to go out and explore the world because they know they've always got that safe harbor to return to. But what happens if that care isn't so consistent? What if that secure base feels a little shaky? Well, that's where we start to see different patterns of attachment, which is exactly what Mary Ainsworth studied with her famous experiment. So the setup for the strange situation was actually pretty simple. You have a child and their mom in a playroom, and then there's a series of short episodes where the mom leaves, a stranger comes in, and so on. But here's the genius part. The researchers weren't just watching to see if the baby cried when mom left. I mean, most babies are going to cry, right? The real tell, the most important moment, was what happened when the mother came back. How did the child react? Did they seek comfort? And how quickly did they calm down? That was the key. Okay, so from watching all these reunions, researchers identified four main patterns of attachment. There's one secure style, and then three different insecure styles. Now, to make these less like textbook definitions, let's imagine four different kids: Luca, Anne, Joe, and Amy. Okay, first up is Luca. He has a secure attachment. So in the experiment, yeah, he's upset when his mom leaves. But the second she walks back in, he goes right to her, gets a hug, calms down pretty fast, and then, this is important, he feels confident enough to go right back to playing. He trusts that his secure base is solid. Now, let's look at Anne. Her experience is different because her caregiver is inconsistent. Sometimes they're there for her, sometimes they're not. So Anne learns she has to really crank up the volume on her emotions to get a response. She's super distressed when her mom leaves, but when she comes back, Anne is ambivalent. She might want a hug, but then she might angrily push her mom away. She's just really hard to soothe. And then you have Joe. He's learned a really tough lesson. Showing big emotions, like crying, only leads to being ignored or punished. So what does he do? He shuts it all down. In the experiment, he barely seems to notice when his mom leaves, and when she comes back, he actively avoids her. It's not that he doesn't care, it's that he's learned, in a heartbreaking way, to hide his need for connection to stay safe. Finally, there's the most complex pattern, disorganized attachment. This is often linked to things like trauma. For Amy, the person who is supposed to be her safe haven is also a source of fear. And you can just imagine how confusing that is. It creates this impossible conflict in her head, so her behavior is all over the place. She might freeze or look scared or seem dazed when her caregiver returns. There's just no clear, organized strategy for her to feel safe. Okay, so this is all really fascinating stuff about babies, but why does it matter so much later in life? Well, it's because these early patterns create what we call an internal working model. It's like a subconscious blueprint for what relationships are supposed to feel like. And that blueprint influences, well, pretty much everything. We're talking about your ability to understand and manage your emotions, your social skills, your sense of self-worth, and your basic level of trust in other people. It even gets under your skin, affecting how your body responds to stress and even your long-term physical health. And if you need proof of how powerful this is, get this. One study was able to predict with 77% accuracy which kids would eventually drop out of high school. And they did it based only on the child's attachment style at age 3. That's just wild. It shows you how deep these early roots go. And it doesn't stop there. Check this one out from Harvard. They followed a group of men for 35 years. Of the guys who said they had a poor relationship with their mother when they were young, a whopping 91% developed serious health problems in midlife, things like heart disease. So our first relationships don't just stay in the past. They echo through our bodies for decades. Okay, let's bring all this home and make it really practical. For many of you listening, you're heading toward a career in a classroom or working with kids. So what does this theory mean for you on the ground? Honestly, understanding attachment theory is like having a superpower as a teacher. You can use it to build a safe, predictable classroom with consistent routines. You can support kids through tough moments like drop-off and help them co-regulate, which is just helping them calm down when their feelings get too big. But maybe the biggest thing is this. You can start to see difficult behavior not as a kid being bad, but as a kid communicating a need. Your ultimate goal? To be a secure base for them at school. When you really boil it all down, it comes back to this. It's about creating an environment where every child feels safe, secure, seen, and soothed. When you can model that kind of responsive care, you aren't just managing a classroom. You are literally helping to build healthier brains and lay a stronger foundation for life. And so I want to leave you with this one big question to think about. The reality is, for some kids you work with, you and your classroom might be the most stable, predictable, and safe place in their entire world. So as you move forward, how can you intentionally become that secure base for a child who might not have one anywhere else? It's a huge responsibility for sure, but it is also an incredible opportunity. Thanks for tuning in.